America just launched massive strikes against Iran, targeting hundreds of military sites simultaneously. Officials promised swift regime change through overwhelming air power and precision technology alone. They say boots on the ground won't be necessary this time. What if I told you this exact strategy has failed every single time it's been tried? Guess which pattern repeats while taxpayers fund wars that cannot possibly succeed? Everyone believes modern technology has changed how wars work and victories happen. What if superior weapons actually guarantee nothing without ground occupation? Most people assume precision strikes and advanced aircraft can topple regimes remotely now. The military-industrial complex sells this story because ground invasions are unpopular. Politicians repeat it because voters oppose casualties. You're taught that America's technological dominance makes traditional military rules obsolete now. But what actually determines regime change versus what gets marketed to citizens? If air power alone could remove governments, every conflict would end quickly and cleanly. Yet America has been bombing targets for decades without achieving lasting victories. How does this pattern persist if the strategy fundamentally doesn't work? Regime change requires physical occupation. This isn't opinion. It's historical fact verified across centuries. You cannot change a government by destroying buildings from above. You must occupy the capital, remove leadership physically, install new government, maintain presence until transition stabilizes. If understanding why America keeps fighting unwinnable wars using strategies history proves ineffective interests you, consider subscribing to Prof. Jung Explained. This channel examines patterns that repeat because lessons aren't learned institutionally. Share this with someone watching current strikes against Iran wondering why this feels familiar. They need to see what history teaches about air power limitations. The first historical lesson is Germany and Japan. World War II ended through total occupation, not bombing alone. America dropped more bombs on Germany than any previous conflict. Cities were flattened, infrastructure destroyed. Yet the Nazi regime continued functioning. Hitler's government only fell when Allied ground forces occupied Berlin physically. Japan received even more devastating bombing, including 2 nuclear weapons. Tokyo was firebombed until entire neighborhoods ceased to exist. Yet Japan's government remained intact. Surrender only came after atomic bombs demonstrated total vulnerability. And even then, occupation forces landed. MacArthur governed Japan for years. The regime changed because American troops controlled the territory. This established the pattern. Bombing softens targets. Ground forces change regimes. You cannot skip the second step. Every attempt to do so has failed. But each generation of leaders believes their technology is different, their precision is better, their strategy is smarter. The second lesson is Vietnam. America dropped more bombs on Vietnam than all of World War II combined. More tonnage than every previous conflict in human history. For years, systematically destroying targets. Yet North Vietnam's government never wavered. Why? Because bombs don't remove determined leadership. The Vietnamese government moved underground, dispersed assets, continued functioning despite massive destruction above. American air power killed hundreds of thousands, destroyed infrastructure completely. But it didn't change the regime. That would have required ground invasion and occupation of Hanoi, which never happened. So America lost despite overwhelming technological superiority. This pattern repeated in Serbia. NATO bombed Yugoslavia for 78 days straight. Precision strikes. Overwhelming force. Minimal NATO casualties. Yet Milosevic stayed in power. The regime didn't collapse. Eventually, internal political pressure removed him. But the bombing didn't accomplish regime change. It just destroyed infrastructure while leadership survived. Then came Iraq. The 2003 invasion looked different initially. Shock and awe. Massive bombing. Quick ground invasion. Saddam's statue toppled within weeks. Mission accomplished declared. But what actually happened next? 20 years of occupation. Thousands of American casualties. Trillions in costs. And the original government was only removed because ground troops occupied Baghdad. Even with ground forces, stabilizing the new regime required decades. Without ground forces, regime change would have been impossible. The bombing alone would have accomplished nothing. Saddam would have survived underground. The government would have continued functioning, just like every other case in history. Afghanistan reinforced the lesson again. 20 years of occupation, advanced technology, precision strikes, overwhelming air power. Yet the moment ground troops withdrew, the previous regime returned immediately. Because ground presence determines who governs. Not air power, not precision, not technology, physical occupation. Now consider Iran, right now, this week. America is bombing hundreds of targets simultaneously, using the most advanced weapons ever developed. Precision beyond anything previous generations imagined. Yet history says this won't work. Why? Because Iran's government isn't vulnerable to airstrikes. Iran has prepared for this war for 20 years, since Bush called them axis of evil. They knew American conflict was inevitable, so they dispersed assets, moved critical infrastructure underground, created redundancy, hardened leadership positions. They studied how America fights. They watched Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria. They learned every lesson. In June 2024, Iran even got a practice run. A 12-day conflict let them test American and Israeli response. They watched which weapons were used, how quickly strikes came, what got targeted. They analyzed everything. So when America strikes now, Iran isn't surprised. They expected this. They prepared for this. Iran's leadership won't be sitting in obvious government buildings waiting to be bombed. They're underground, dispersed, protected. American air power can destroy infrastructure, kill soldiers, damage economy, but it cannot remove the regime. That would require ground troops occupying Tehran, which isn't happening. The pattern is identical across every case. Leaders ignore history. They believe their situation is different. Their technology is better. Their enemy is weaker. So they try air power alone. It fails. Then they face a choice: admit failure and withdraw, or escalate to ground invasion. Withdrawal means wasting resources while accomplishing nothing. The regime remains. Ground invasion means casualties and decades of occupation, which is why air power gets tried first. It's politically easier, technologically impressive, even though it doesn't work. Consider the economics. America spends 11 to 33 million per interceptor missile. Iran's missiles cost around 100,000 each. So America spends 110 to 330 times more defending than Iran spends attacking. This ratio is unsustainable. Iran can launch hundreds of missiles. America cannot afford to intercept them all. This asymmetry matters enormously. Iran doesn't need to win conventionally. They need to outlast American willingness to spend. Every interceptor is millions. Every strike package is billions. Economic attrition is the strategy. America is playing 20th century conventional war. Iran is playing 21st century asymmetric conflict. Different games, different rules. America wants quick, decisive victory. Iran wants long, grinding attrition. America will exhaust resources before achieving objectives. Ground invasion is inevitable if America truly commits to regime change. History proves this, but ground invasion of Iran would be catastrophic. Tehran has 9 million people. Urban warfare there would dwarf Iraq. Casualties would be immense. Duration would be decades. Russia and China would arm Iranian resistance exactly like America armed Afghans against Soviets. Weapons, intelligence, training, turn it into proxy war. Bleed American resources indefinitely. So why does pattern repeat? Why do leaders keep trying failed strategies? 3 reasons. First, recent success creates overconfidence. Trump recently captured Venezuela's president. Quick, clean, successful. This made Iran seem easier than it is. Hitler made same mistake. Conquered Europe rapidly. France fell in 6 weeks. This made Soviet invasion seem achievable, but Soviets bled Germany to death. Overconfidence from early victories led to catastrophic error. Second, ground invasions are politically toxic. Voters oppose casualties. Media shows flag-draped coffins. Public support evaporates. So leaders try technological solutions, precision strikes, overwhelming air power. These are marketable, even though they don't achieve objectives. Third, leaders optimize for personal interests, not national interests. Trump receives massive support from Saudi Arabia and Israel. Saudis invested $2 billion in Kushner's fund. Israel's Adelson pledged $250 million. These are bribes for attacking Iran. So Trump personally benefits even if America doesn't. He gets financial backing, political support, emergency war powers. The war might be disaster for America, but it helps Trump, so it happens. This reveals why unwinnable wars start. They serve immediate interests. Contractors profit. Allies are satisfied. Power consolidates. Whether objectives are achieved becomes secondary. Public opposition doesn't matter. 78% of Americans opposed Iran strikes. They happened anyway. Political will follows leadership, not public. This is why pattern repeats. Incentives favor trying failed strategies. Costs are distributed. Benefits concentrate. The current Iran strikes will follow the historical pattern. Massive bombing, infrastructure damage, economic disruption, but no regime change. Iran's government will survive, leadership will remain, then America faces the choice: withdraw having accomplished nothing, or escalate to ground invasion knowing it will be catastrophic. Either outcome represents strategic failure, but the war serves immediate political interests, satisfies allies, maintains contractor revenue, consolidates executive power, so it continues despite being unwinnable. This is the actual logic, not what gets presented publicly, But what actually drives decision-making? History teaches clear lessons. Air power alone never changes regimes. Ground occupation is required always. Iran is more defensible than previous targets. The costs would be astronomical. The duration would be decades. The outcome would likely be failure. Yet the war happens anyway, because winning isn't actually the objective. Serving immediate interests is. Understanding this distinction matters. You're told wars are about democracy and national security, but wars are actually about who benefits immediately. Follow the money, follow the power. That reveals why unwinnable wars get fought repeatedly. There's also shock and awe mythology. Hit enemy with overwhelming force initially, and they surrender immediately. But this only works if enemy fights conventionally. If they refuse conventional engagement, shock and awe becomes expensive fireworks. You destroy buildings. Regime survives underground. Iraq 2003 demonstrated this. Initial invasion destroyed Iraqi army in 3 weeks. Mission accomplished declared. Then 20 years of insurgency began. Destroying conventional forces didn't eliminate determined resistance. Iran learned every lesson from Iraq. They won't line up forces to be destroyed. They'll absorb shock, go underground, strike back asymmetrically, target economic interests, use proxies. This is their prepared strategy. The technological superiority trap compounds everything. Advanced weapons are expensive. F-35 costs $80 million. Losing one is catastrophic politically, so operations become risk-averse. This prevents aggressive action that might achieve objectives. Meanwhile, Iran has cheap weapons, flexible tactics. They can sustain losses without political consequences. This asymmetry matters enormously. Expensive technology gets paralyzed by loss aversion. Cheap tactics can take risks. This explains why inferior forces often outlast superior ones. Vietnam, Afghanistan, Iraq, superior technology, inferior results. Because the game is about willingness to sustain costs. Cheap asymmetric tactics outlast expensive conventional operations every time. Strategic depth miscalculation matters too. America sees sanctions struggling economy, but Iran has prepared for this war for 20 years, built resistance economy, studied American tactics exhaustively, developed countermeasures specifically for American capabilities. When America strikes, Iran implements plans developed over years. They're not surprised, they're executing prepared strategy. The technologically superior force operates with worse information, because they underestimated opponent preparation. The final mechanism is forever war economy. Defense contractors profit from ongoing conflict, not victory. Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, Northrop Grumman. These companies make money from weapons being used, not wars ending. So incentive is prolonged conflict, maximum consumption, continuous contracts. This creates perverse incentives. Strategies that end wars quickly hurt contractor revenue. Strategies that fail slowly maximize profit. So institutional bias favors approaches that fail slowly rather than succeed quickly. This isn't conspiracy, it's incentive structure. Politicians receive contributions from contractors in exchange for supporting spending, approving sales, maintaining conflict. The system sustains itself. Victory would disrupt it. Stalemate maintains it. So stalemate happens. You're watching this pattern unfold now with Iran. Massive strikes, billions in weapons consumed, contractors profiting, politicians supported, but no regime change. Because regime change was never the objective. The war itself is the objective. The ongoing expenditure. This is why pattern repeats. Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan, now Iran, different countries, same strategy, same failure, same beneficiaries. The lesson isn't learned because learning would end revenue. So each generation repeats the same mistakes because mistakes serve interests. Understanding this changes everything. You stop asking why smart people make dumb decisions. You start asking whose interests are served. You stop believing stated objectives. You start tracking money flow. You stop expecting different results. You recognize the pattern. The unwinnable war is feature, not bug, designed to continue, to consume resources, to justify budgets, to maintain power. Winning was never the point. Fighting is the point. And fighting continues as long as it serves right interests. Your interests aren't included, but your tax dollars are.